Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sasha Farbach. Poland is investigating what Prime Minister Donald Tusk has described as a violation of its airspace after an unidentified object left a 10-meter crater near the Ukrainian border during Russia's latest overnight missile and drone assault. Now, as Warsaw responds to the security incident, Washington is moving closer to what could become its toughest sanctions package yet against Moscow, following a positive Trump-Zelensky meeting and an overwhelming bipartisan Senate vote. And joining us now to discuss it all is Louis Wierenga, lecturer in international relations at the Baltic Defence College. Good to have you back with us.
Great to be with you, Sasha.
Let's start with the latest. This recent stray missile, this ballistic missile that we're hearing about, southeastern Poland, 10-meter crater. Likely what we're looking at right now could very well be a Russian missile. What does this tell us about where we are with air defense? I mean, we've had similar kind of things around the Baltic states as well. We've had also the drones in Romania. What does this tell us, this latest incident here in Poland?
Well, I mean, the war is very close to us geographically. I mean, that's whether or not it's boundary testing or a mistake. That'll be ruled out later. But either of those two possibilities, it just reinforces the dire sense that this needs to be wrapped up. And I think that Ukraine's drone innovation and them taking the fight further into Russia, especially in the Moscow part of the country, as well as positive news out of Washington and continued multilateral support for Ukraine inside of Europe, is all leading us into the right direction. But I think being overly optimistic, these types of things always remind us that Russia is an aggressor state and that they're not going to give up easily with their nonlinear hybrid attacks on European countries. And I think that trying to break support for Ukraine amongst NATO allies is something that Russia is not successful in doing, but it doesn't mean that they're going to stop trying to do this as they get more and more desperate.
Mm-hmm. I mean, also looking at how this is conducted, the investigation that's underway at the moment, we're just seeing some images there of authorities in Poland looking at that crash and that crater. Let's just roll a quick clip from Poland's defense minister, Mr. Koźmiak-Kamysz, what he had to say about this.
An incredibly difficult night for our air defence, early warning and public alert systems. My thanks to the operational command of the Polish Armed Forces and all those who coordinated, monitored, analysed and reacted to the events in Ukraine and in Polish airspace. Reports were disseminated and coordinated by relevant services and reached the most important figures in the country. An investigation is currently underway to clarify what sort of object crashed outside the town of Tarnowa Kolonia.
So you said they're an incredibly difficult night for air defense. At the same time, I just want to get your thoughts on it. I mean, this is timing here is interesting. We just had President Zelensky return from Washington. You had Prime Minister Tusk also relatively in this sort of region of Poland. Do you think that was the intent here? If it does turn out to be a Russian missile, was this a message from the Kremlin?
I think that it's more likely than not is. I mean, Ukrainians' acting foreign minister said that this missile was a Russian KH-101 cruise missile. And I think that, the timing and the sort of messaging that Russia intends to send, it's always deliberate. And I think that they're trying to, it's kind of like a Hail Mary, trying to attempt to exploit whatever they can and create divisions. I don't think it's going to be successful, of course, because it's a reminder that eastern flank countries are going to bear the brunt of these so-called accidents and these boundary testing and message sending incidences that are enacted by the Kremlin. So I think that right now, the best type of thing is to be prepared for intense hybrid threats. I mean, there have been some intel reports that Poland is high on the Kremlin's list of a very intense and significant nonlinear incursion that would stop short, of course, of kinetic aggression. But I don't think that Russia is really ready for enacting something that serious right now, given what's happening on the battlefield, and also the political shift with allies when it comes to thwarting Russia's aggression against Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. And that aggression against Ukraine received quite a strong signal in Washington, and we've had this sanctions bill, this Lindsey Graham, named after that Russia hawk. The funeral was just a few days ago. So looking at that, I mean, that passed overwhelmingly in the Senate. I think 81 votes along the lines, 86 rather, sorry. What does this tell us in terms of the kind of political appetite right now, being tougher on Russia? How fast will this bite? How much of, let's say, more in this regard can we expect now that this has gone through?
Well, I think the tide has turned. I think one important thing to remember is that House Republicans and Senate Republicans tend to be, especially in the Senate, they tend to be staunch supporters of Ukraine and transatlantic relations. And I think that one of the things that Senator Graham and others, Senator Blumenthal, his Democratic counterpart, and other people have been trying to do is warm up President Trump to something like this. And I think that because of the crink, China, Russia, Iran and North Korea, especially the Chinese and Iranian involvement with Russia, linking two of the wars right now, that kind of signal to President Trump, as well as the momentum shift and what Ukraine is doing in terms of innovation and on the battlefield. I think that the president probably sees this as President Zelensky having the cards, and he sees, he likes winners, he doesn't like losers, and so the momentum is very much in Ukraine's favor. And I mean, President Zelensky and Finnish President Alexander Stubb were there in Washington when this passed. And although it needs to go to the House and then the White House to sign, both Republican Speaker Mike Johnson and President Trump have said that they are very, very warm to signing this bill. And one of the mega influencers, if you will, she does not hold a position in the government. Laura Loomer was recently in Ukraine, had a sit down with President Zelensky, and came back and really discussed how Russian disinformation had led her to initially think a different way. And now she understands that Ukraine is a key and important ally of the United States, and she has the ear of the president. And this is really important right now because this sanctions package also targets more Russian officials as well as oligarchs and their family members and people who support people who buy Russian oil and gas. So this has a lot of teeth in it, and it's something that is really in line with the late Senator Lindsey Graham's views. But it also has a lot of bipartisan support just months ahead of the midterms. And so that is one issue where I think we have a lot of consensus in Washington. And I think that it also signals to European allies that the United States is still very much involved in transatlantic security.
Mm-hmm. And also, you mentioned this has teeth. Let's talk about those teeth for a moment. I think one interesting component of this, it allows for, I believe it's 100% tariffs on the biggest buyers and importers of Russian oil. I mean, that could potentially now target big buyers like the Chinese, potentially the Indians. So how much is that going to alter their behavior?
Well, I mean, I think the likelihood of it altering their behavior is probably a little bit, especially when it comes to India and China. I think that they have more incentive to remain open to Western markets. And I think that, Russia depends on China more than the other way around. So it'll be a real test of this friendship without boundaries, because I think the last thing that China wants to have happen is to have a reduced status when it comes to anything economic right now, and the Russian economy is not so hot. But it'll really be a test to see how far Beijing is willing to go to try and use this Cranks alliance to supplant a Western world order where the United States is in the driving seat, which is now becoming a little bit more of a multilateral driving seat, if I can use that metaphor, but still there is, I think, some semblance to a Western world order. And this also brings in the future of the so-called rupture. If the United States is really putting a bill with a lot of teeth into it to sanction not just Russia, but also Iran and China and any buyers of Russian gas, does this mean that this will sort of reverse course against the rupture? We'll have to see what happens then. And I think if that goes to a positive direction, then that will be what ultimately impacts the calculus of China and India.
Yeah, indeed. And I think, but still, a bill of this kind of size on the strongest sanctions packages against Moscow. So that for sure will be something we'll analyze more, and for sure will be noticed very much so in the Kremlin. Look, we'll have to close it there. Thanks so much for joining us. Always a pleasure having you, Louis Wierenga there. Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure, Sasha. Thank you.
And thank you for watching World Talks, but do stay right here on TVP World for more. Goodbye.